Goldberg. I couldn't answer all your calls. We have a time limit. That's why I say to you, when you call Borderlines, you must remember, make your questions short, sharp, succinct. Seconds, if you want an answer. My next guest, who's just disappeared from my screen. So very, technology can be so interesting. Let me tell you. So, my next guest is a Libyan academic and journalist. So he's going to be giving us a perspective once he comes back to his seat. He's going to be giving us a perspective on the role of the Arab League, indeed on the genocide that's going on in Gaza, on the strike that happened with Iran, what we should expect. We've heard comments and everything from Saudi Arabia. They've all condemned, etc. Dr. Fetouri, can you hear me now? Dr. Fetouri, can you hear me? Hello? I can see you, but I can't hear you, Dr. Fetouri. Can you hear me? Hello? Oh dear. I'm not quite sure. I can see him. Okay, I think he's trying to sort out his earpiece. Yes, he's using he's trying to put in his wired earpiece. So as soon as he's able to do that and he can hear me, we can continue the conversation. Dr. Fetouri, can you hear me now? Hello? Dr. Fetouri? Is he on mute? No, he's not on mute. I don't think he can hear me. This is very interesting. I can see him, and I can see him putting on his earpiece, but Dr. Fetouri, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent.
I had a problem with the wireless earpiece, so I changed it.
Indeed, no problem, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Borderlines, and welcome to Nigeria, Lagos to be precise. Can you hear me? Okay, I don't
Me?
think...
Yes,
you. Right. I said welcome to Borderlines and welcome to Lagos, Nigeria.
Thank you very much for having me. I want to make sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is it Ireti?
Yeah, you are. You are. I have to say, the very first guest in almost 2 years that I've been doing this show that got my name right the first time. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
No, I really appreciate that. Not that I'm bothered, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
So we don't have much time. We only have 45 minutes conversation. Let me take us. I'd like to start from what we saw overnight with Israel attacking Iran and Iran's nuclear facility. What are your thoughts on that to start off with?
Well, I would like to thank you again for having me. And of course, I find this, joining a show like this in the African continent is quite important, and probably much more important than doing a CNN show or something else, because we have so much in common, and we share a lot of ideas, a lot of history, and that, of course, includes Iran. And, of course, the Israeli aggression we have just witnessed overnight is blatant aggression against all international laws. And Israel has no basis to play, the policeman of the world. It's a nuclear-armed, aggressive colonial outpost, and nobody's doing anything about this. And while they have been complaining about the Iranian nuclear program, which is 100% peaceful over the last 30 years. So what happened last night was actually not surprising to me, and I guess it's not surprising to anybody who has been following the situation in the region, especially over the last 2 years, what was surprising probably is the timing. We were kind of having some kind of a positive push forward when Donald Trump and the Iranian side talked about the sixth round of talks expected this Sunday. And there was a lot of enthusiasm that there could be a deal between the United States of America and Iran over Iran's nuclear program. And then suddenly, nobody really was expecting the colonial entity, so-called Israel, to launch the attack at this time. It's a blatant attack. It's against international law. It should be condemned by everybody and should not be tolerated. And the UN, as well as the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna, they should take a very strong position and tell Israel that it cannot do what it wants and get away with it.
But they never do. They never do, Doctor. Israel seems to continue to get away with, it literally escalates and it gets away with more. It pushes the boundaries further and further out. One could argue that boundary no longer exists for Israel. And the question then comes back to, why is Israel so special? How does Israel get away with literally breaking international law all the time, as we saw with the Freedom Flotilla, where Israel intercepted it in international waters, and the world, rather than condemn Israel, actually began to make derision of the very, very smart, brave, courageous international activists, 12 of them, who tried to break the siege in Gaza. Talk to us about that, unpack that, help it make sense, as we say in Nigeria.
Well, it doesn't really make any sense to any independent and free-thinking person or an expert in the region, especially when it comes to you see the thing is, there is no such thing as international community, and there is no such thing as an effective United Nations body, including, unfortunately, the Security Council, which is really like the late Gaddafi described it in 2009 when he described it as the Council of Horror, simply because a country like Israel and a country like apartheid South Africa 30 years ago, and for Israel is still the case today, they can simply do whatever they want and get away with it just because one of the veto powers, in this case the United States, is protecting that state. In the case of Israel, they have done unimaginable destruction, and they spread hatred as well over the last decade or so, and they have been besieging Gaza for the last 18 or 19 years now. And now when they started their genocide 2 years ago, October 23, so far they have killed something like 56 civilians in Gaza, 60 to 70% of whom are children, including babies and women. And yet nobody did anything. The only thing we actually have to attribute it to Mr. Karim Khan, who's the prosecutor of the ICC, is the fact that he managed, with at great cost actually for him and for the court, to get an arrest warrant for the top two haters and criminals, Netanyahu himself and Yoav Gallant, the former defense minister. So. And even then, we are not settled yet, and we cannot say that Israel is being forced to pay for its actions or being held accountable, simply because there's no prospect for such warrants to be carried out. I doubt if we will ever see any of the two criminals or anybody else from the criminal Israeli Defense Force, IDF, being brought to The Hague to face the court, ever. Simply, again, because there is a United States law that authorizes the President of the United States. Look at this. This is very shameful. This is unthinkable. There is a law that was passed in 2005, I guess, or sometime before that, around maybe at the end of the 90s, that allows the President of the United States to take every action, including military invasion, to invade the Netherlands, The Hague, where the ICC is setting, in case it gets the court gets its hands on an American soldier or serviceman or politician, as well as any of America's allies, which means Israel in this case. So there is a law that allows him to do that. And I'm quite sure, I'm quite certain that this law will be enacted the moment the court gets hold of any Israeli. Forget about the Prime Minister and the former Defense Minister. I'm talking here about a simple soldier who shared his terrible actions and atrocities committed in Gaza online using his phone, his or her phone, mobile phone, and then was picked up and indicted by the court. There's an organization working in this space in Brussels, and I happen to know a lot about this organization, is also helping them out. So even if that happens, there's a case, for example, proceeding now in Peru, Latin America, against a soldier who has been identified by an independent organization that he committed crimes against humanity in Gaza and crimes of war, and he's being indicted in Peru. So if that comes to incarcerating this guy, this person, and putting him in jail, I'm sure the United States will do everything to get him out.
Indeed. You paint a very, very dark picture. So, at the very least, like most people agree, nobody from Israeli politics or politician is actually going to see the inside of a court, let alone be arrested for this. Let's talk about the theology of fear. Often people have said, we have to bear in mind that what happened in the Holocaust, which is possibly driving the fear of the Israelis. You wrote in your book, Faith and Politics in Israel, the religious Zionism of Haredi, Rabbi Yehuda and Amital. You explore how fear more than hope has become sacred in the Israeli political imagination. So how do you see this fear manifesting in what we're seeing today?
Well, it's basically, what Israel has been doing, over the last 75 years since it's ever existed in the region over Palestine in 1948 is basically, two things. First thing is to install fear in everybody else, including the Jewish people. And I will explain how's that. Fear that, if you are not happy with Israel, if you are not happy with the policies of Israel, if you are not happy with the crimes Israel continues to commit, and has always been committing since it was created in 1948, then it's better for you just to keep it yourself. Don't talk about it. Why? Because the moment you say anything about the state of Israel, not about Judaism as a religion, just the state of Israel, like when you criticize any other state, Nigeria for that matter, or Zimbabwe, or Libya, or any country, or the United States. No. In the case of Israel, there's this hidden connection projected by the extremists, including the current prime minister, criminal Netanyahu, that there is no disconnection between anti-Semitism and Israel. So the moment you say Netanyahu is a criminal, straight away you get the label you are anti-Semitic, which of course is bizarre. It has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. That's the fear being installed into the outside world or any potential critic of Israel. For the Jews inside Israel itself and abroad, everywhere else around the world, the Zionism is always installing the fear in them, based on what they prescribe as biblical teaching, that everybody else hates you, and you should, Jewish people, hate everybody else, and you should make sure that you survive, but they don't, which is, of course, a very bizarre way of understanding religion. If we are talking about the same God that created you, me, and the Jewish people, and the Muslims and Christians and Hindus and so on and so forth, he cannot be such a terrible God that says to the Jewish people, you are the best and you are allowed to kill everybody else to survive. So it's a twofold fear being installed around the world. Okay. And because of this, there is this misinterpretation of almost everything that has to do with the Jews. Very few people around the world understand it, and simply because Israel is making sure that you don't really understand the whole thing thoroughly as it should be, because that will open your eyes to different facts, and because you are afraid of being labeled anti-Semitic. And the moment you are labeled anti-Semitic in the West or in the United States, I have been living in the West for over 40 years, and you become dead man walking. You lose your job, you lose your career, you become untouchable. You could die of hunger just because of this symbol label, which is fake most of the time. And actually, over the last 2 years, since October 2023, Israel has been doing everything that make the label itself worthless, meaningless, and doesn't install fear in anybody anymore. And I have seen it in the almost daily demonstrations in Paris and Amsterdam and The Hague and London, everywhere, you name it. People are not afraid anymore.
Indeed. Let's talk about the Arab League. The Arab League, they were seen as the defender of Arab sovereignty. We are in a genocide. We no longer need to actually hide behind it, I don't think, because whatever journalism demands of me, of us, of those of us, is to speak the truth. And it is widely accepted to be a genocide. So we've seen a genocide which has killed mostly women and children, but we've barely heard a whisper from the Arab League. What's going on?
Well, the Arab League already has been a kind of, dead organization in birth since it was created in 1945. And it is connection as an idea. It was, as you probably know, it was the first British idea when the British, shrewd as they are, colonial forces at the time in the region, realized that they are losing influence, and they are losing the colonies they contain, they control in that area, including Palestine, which of course they gave it to the Jewish people, the Zionists actually, I would say, realizing that the days of the empire, the British Empire, are ending very soon. So they wanted to maintain influence and protect their future interests in the region by floating the idea of the Arab League. And based on this, the Arab League was created. And In its earlier days, the Arab League was very active organization, regional organization that included almost 1/3 of the Arab countries at the time, who are independent countries, because it's one of the conditions. You cannot really join the organization unless you are an independent state. So that's they started with 1/3 of the countries, the Arab countries, 22 Arab countries, and moved on. And they did quite a good things in the early 2 decades, especially in 1969 and 1972, 1970, I'm sorry, in both Khartoum and Rabat summits. They took very important decisions, and they stood by them. They defended these decisions. But along the way, over the years, the organization never really reorganized itself, never reformed its charter, which is still the one that was written in 1945 with the little changes. But they did one very important thing in the 1950s. Most of the Arab countries were independent, and they did actually two things. One, and the very important thing I refer to, is that they signed the Pan-Arab Defense Treaty, which is like includes articles like Article 5 of the NATO Treaty, whereby any aggression against one country is against the rest of the member states. In this case, 22 Arab countries, as we see in NATO. But the problem with that, they never implemented it. And the second important thing they did in the 70s, which of course they implemented it, but to no real meaning on the ground, is that they accepted the Palestinian as an independent state called Palestine, represented in every sub-organization within the Arab League, including the Pan-Arabist or Collective Defense Treaty of the 1950s, I just mentioned. Yet, the Palestinians are being killed every day and night, every minute of the day, and the Arab League never thought about activating that treaty. It has already signed. In the meantime, those who decided, the Arab states who decided to normalize ties and give up on Palestine, normalize ties with the Zionist entity, they are making sure that every treaty, every memorandum of understanding, every agreement they sign with the criminal Zionists, they make sure it gets implemented right away, but not the ones they signed decades ago. And right. This has created the kind of very negative backlash from the Arab masses against the organization itself. Now it's hated almost by everybody from Rabat on the Atlantic to Bahrain and the Gulf region. Nobody likes it. Nobody counts on it, and it has, unfortunately, it has been turned into sub-lobbying organization for Israel. And I will explain that later on if we have the time.
Well, please go ahead. What do you mean?
Okay.
I would ask you. I'm going to give you 1 minute to do that because we've still got questions to go through. Explain, sure. What do you mean by sub-lobby?
But by sub-lobbying, what I mean is this. There was a time before 2020, just 5 years ago, when any strong language decision discussed in the Arab League meetings, at the summit level or below, gets sailing straight away. Nobody objects to it. Nobody says, no, you have to change that word or this phrase or anything. That has changed now. Why? After 2020, because United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and of course Morocco, as well as Sudan at different stages, all of them accepted the principle of normalizing ties with the Zionist state at the expense of the Palestinian. So how is that reflected in becoming sub-lobby organization? Is the fact that those countries, especially the United Arab Emirates, now they started to object to any decision taken by the Arab League at any level if it has very strong language against Israel. For example, using the word genocide. The United Arab Emirates would not allow it inside the. Unfortunately, this is a very, I don't know. It's a kind of one of those bitter ironies whereby you know you have the right, you know you are right, but you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Simply because the other guys say no.
It's interesting, yes, because of course you mentioned Saudi Arabia, but we also have the UAE, who have been coming out against Palestine. They've actually been saying they are on the Israel side. And of course, you've given us a good sort of framework and understanding of where the Arab League stands. Let's talk about Egypt, though. Abdel Fattah el-Sisi is an interesting one. So there is a huge caravan heading to Cairo, from Cairo, that's heading to Rafah. And we are already seeing that Egypt is actually deporting some of those who are joining that caravan. What is it? What is the situation with Egypt? And why is Egypt is Egypt a collaborator or is it a foe? Is it a friend to the Palestinians or is it against the Palestinians? What is Israel? Not Israel, Egypt, rather.
Well, first of all, I'm not up to date because I have been very busy with the Iran situation. So I'm not sure if the caravan actually was allowed to leave Cairo so far.
There you go. Yes.
Early this morning, the latest information I had from people in Cairo, they are telling me the government did not give them any permission to leave. That's one caravan. That's one solidarity group. There is another also caravan that's leaving. That started from Tunisia, west of Libya, to Algeria, and then to Libya, and then now it's getting closer to Libya-Egypt borders, and it's hoping to get into Egypt, and then from Cairo to Rafah. Which will not happen. Of course, the Egyptian authorities have not given any permission to anybody to go to Rafah for any reason, including the media. That's why you don't see any reports, live or recorded, on the Egyptian side of the borders, or what we call Egyptian Rafah. So have you ever seen any?
Yeah, so tell us, El-Sisi, what's he up to? I mean, why? What is he afraid of, if indeed he can do anything at all?
No, actually, he is not up to anything good. That's one thing. The second thing is Sisi is the kind of man who lacks political will, if you like. He doesn't dare to take any decisions that might upset the Americans, simply because he depends too much on American aid. And why Egypt is so poor despite the resources? There are several reasons, and one on top of the reasons is that the economic mismanagement and the corruption. So ever since Egypt signed the 1979 Camp David Accords, making quote unquote peace with Israel, Egypt has been getting 3 point something billion US dollars aid every year, most of it military aid, and the little that goes to the economy is not enough, actually. And because of that, Sisi or any other president, doesn't have the means, if you like, or he thinks doesn't have the means, simply because he doesn't he cannot stomach the idea of saying no to the Americans. He cannot stomach the idea of saying no to the Israelis. I mean, for example, Israel could have played a very important part in restraining the Egypt. Egypt could have played a very critical part in making sure that Israel doesn't cross certain red lines in the Gaza Strip, including the use of food and water and medicine as a weapon, simply by threatening Tel Aviv. If the Sisi came out yesterday and said, if Benjamin Netanyahu, you continue starving the people in Gaza, tomorrow morning I will recall my ambassador and he will never go back to Tel Aviv again until you apologize. Benjamin Netanyahu will immediately respond and positively respond, simply because, not because he's afraid of Egypt, because of the strength of Egypt, no, but because Egypt is the main threat to Israel, the long-term threat to Israel, one thing. The other thing, it's the leading caravan of normalization. Without Egypt, we would not have seen Emirates normalizing, or Bahrain normalizing, or Morocco normalizing, for that matter. So it's unfortunately, most of the Arab rulers, especially the kinds of Sisi, they're just afraid. They lack the political will, and they think increased prices because of removing subsidies, because of cuts in the aid from the West, for example, will just backlash against them, and people take the streets and topple them. That's not the case. People will understand, even if things become very expensive for them in Egypt, for example. As long as you are doing something about Gaza, they would just help you. They would actually support you. They would never complain. So it's the betrayal, the politics of betrayal we are going through in the Arab world has been prevailing over the last 30 years. And since we lost people like Saddam Hussein and then Colonel Gaddafi, I think the downwards trend is continuing and will continue for some time. But at some point, we will get up again on our feet, and everything will be changed, as we have seen in the African Sahel region, starting with Niger and Mali. You see what's going on with these countries. Who would have thought, actually, that France would leave?
Indeed. Nobody would have. Dr. Fetouri, this is so interesting. Unfortunately, we don't have much time. Right. I want to talk to you about Libya. So we've heard this rumor that, that Libya may be pressured into accepting 1 million Palestinian refugees in exchange for the unfreezing of 67 billion in Libyan sovereign wealth assets. Is that true?
Well, it could be true. I don't have any information to say.
Well, do you think it's possible? Do you think it's possible?
Of course I do. For a very simple reason. For a very simple reason. Of course, if any government does that, if any government in Libya does that and accept Palestinian refugees being cleansed out of Gaza, it will not spend another day in government. It will end. They will just probably get lynched in the streets. But I say it's very possible. Why? Because we have never, ever in our history in Libya, and the Africans know this very well, ever have got such a betrayal and such a corrupt government in our history. So those criminals, they call the government in Tripoli as well as in Benghazi, they are capable of doing anything. They never get ashamed of doing anything, any shameful act. They would just do it. Like accepting criminals, deportees from the United States, for example. So I would say it will never happen, not because the government doesn't want to, no, because the people will not allowed. And the government here and the government of Benghazi, if they ever think about it, they know the reaction of the people will be swift, critical, and dangerous, as well as bloody, if I may say.
We know that I believe Libya is coming up for elections. I think next year or so. Talk to us. What are your expectations from those elections?
Well, first of all, I have to update you. There will be no election this year or next year.
Wow.
Because of serious disagreements. They have been, the last attempt made to get election going was in December 2021. And ever since then, there is mountains of disagreements between East and West in the country. And as you know, we have two governments, and the UN is mediating now, hoping that sometime next year, probably, there will be elections. But I doubt if there will be election in my lifetime, not just next year, simply because those in power now do not want elections, because that will deprive them of all the privileges they have. So they want to stay forever. And unless you really have some kind of militarized militia behind you, you can't really do much in the country. So why a parliamentarian who has never been challenged for the last 10 years, or a minister or prime minister for that matter, why would he accept elections if he knows that he will lose? None of those people in power now will ever win elections again. I mean, they failed in every aspect of the political life of the country, economically, socially. So why would they get elected? They will never get elected again. So there is no incentive for them to actually go to elections. Why should I call for elections if I am comfortable, everything is fine, and they know that I will lose?
Thank you. Right, let me open up the line 0201-277-0993, 0201-465-7190. WhatsApp is 0809-585-597-5805. Dr. Fetouri, I'd like your thoughts on this, and I may have to interrupt you if the lines start ringing. After Gaddafi's death or killing, we hear more and more these days, especially from young people, about the praising of Gaddafi. Africa now misses Gaddafi. Everybody seems to understand more about what Gaddafi stood for and what he meant and what he was working towards. But as of the time when he was assassinated, he was killed, you didn't hear that kind of pro-Gaddafi, noise across Africa, indeed across the global south. Tell us, how does that make you feel as a Libyan?
Well, it makes me feel very proud and vindicated, if you like, because I supported Gaddafi all my life. And even though I don't know the guy, I never met him, I never worked in the government, I never had any salary paid from the government. I have always been an independent person throughout my life so far. And the point you raise is very interesting and usually overlooked by mainstream media, that the fact that at the time in 2011, when he was assassinated and dehumanized to the point that he was made evil, actually, the only evil in the world, nobody supported him, nobody defended him except for a few. The reason behind that, the main top reason, actually because of the gang up of the media, Western media, which is not only getting news to the rest of the world, but also making the news, because of the fake reputation projected for Gaddafi, because of the fake news reported about him and what he was doing. And almost everybody, the focus of the fake news and dehumanization of Gaddafi himself was so intense. Even people close to him inside Libya, I remember, walked away and disappeared simply because they believed some of the stuff they are being subjected to day and night on television, radio, newspapers, wherever you go. And then gradually, after the invasion of Libya by the NATO countries and some Arab countries who helped it, gradually we started to hear different stories, and some of the facts started to come out about Gaddafi, and then we started to realize to read in documents published in the West and in America, including memoirs of top decision makers who decided to invade Libya in 2011, including the evil Hillary Clinton, who was the Secretary of State of the United States at the time, who played a major role in convincing NATO countries and Obama himself to invade Libya. And that she said one of the corrections.
Yeah, if you could wrap up so I can answer that call. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, it was not actually about Libya itself. Some of it has to do with Africa. Why? Because Gaddafi was working for the unified African currency, the gold dinar, backed by Libya's reserves, and he was working for United African Army, and he was working for Common Defense Treaty, and he was investing billions in the Sahel region and beyond in South Africa and other African countries for the benefit of Africans. So that's one of the things they hated him for, and that was his plans were quite a dangerous thing for countries like France, who wanted to keep the Sahel under its thumb.
Okay. Hello. Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you. You see, my question is this. You talked about Arab League. I think Arab League is dead. Since post-1979, when Iran went into the revolution and it became a big rival to some other interests in the peninsula. And that is the reason why America penetrated them. For instance, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and co. And they pushed them against each other. That is why they have been reduced to what they have today. But I want to ask him now. Thank you. I'm happy you mentioned Gaddafi. What about Morsi? Mohamed Morsi, former Egyptian president, who was dethroned by Fattah al-Sisi illegally and supported by America. What if he were alive? Would all of this happen to Palestinian states?
Good question. Thank you. That's a good question. Did you hear that? Doctor, please give me 1 second. Let me answer this, and I'll get you to answer both. Hello? Hello? Can you turn off your radio, please? Hello?
Yeah, hello. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Okay, my name is Obi Azemobi. I'm calling from Iluteju.
Go ahead, Obi.
Okay, no, I heard your guest, and he said he liked Gaddafi, and people are praising Gaddafi. You know, I was grown up when Gaddafi was in power, and I'm not sure. You know, I can't speak for anybody. Can like anybody. I'm not from Libya too. But
well, he's from Libya. But go ahead.
I'm not sure Gaddafi, somebody who did engineered lockup bombing, the amount of funds that he pilfered from the country that were supposed to be used for the development of the people, and these funds are cold cash that are in Italy. In fact, I think up to $6 billion in Italy now. And sometimes also the
I need you to wrap up. We don't have the time, unfortunately.
Okay,
this is borderline, short, sharp, and quick, please.
Okay, the muzzling of the masses. These are issues that have long-term effects, but anybody can like anybody afterwards.
Okay, thank you. So I think you'll hear that I can't remember. Obi, that was my caller, Obi, who said he doesn't understand how you can like Gaddafi, even though you're welcome to your point, because Gaddafi stole money. He did all these things. I can't remember what else he said. I'm going to give you a minute to answer both questions, because now the lines are going and we're almost done, and I want to fit in more calls. Do you have any comments for that?
Yeah, of course. Unfortunately, I did not get the question of the first caller. I got the second one.
Oh, the question of the first caller was about Morsi. would this be happening to Palestine if Mohammed Morsi was still in Egypt?
Well, that's, it's hard to say simply because such things have to be, looked at the moment they happen. But as being, kind of coming from Muslim Brotherhood background, I don't think Mohammed Morsi would be the kind of Sisi we see today. I think he would be different.
Yeah,
he would take certain measures against the Zionists, as I explained earlier. And I would think he would be more aggressive, if you like.
Okay.
How aggressive, I don't know. For the second caller, unfortunately, this is one of the fake stories about Gaddafi, that he stole money. And I don't know if the caller knows that Libya, because of Gaddafi, created the biggest man-made river to transport water from the desert into the northern area and the Mediterranean coast, where most of the population are concentrated. I don't know if the caller knows that Libya, we don't pay taxes most of the time under Gaddafi. And I don't know if he knows that most of the everyday food basic items are subsidized under Gaddafi, and that we get loans from government and government banks to buy durable goods like a fridge and a car and things like this without interest. We get loans under Gaddafi to pay our houses, to build our houses without interest. We get thousands of Libyan students every year that study in America and West and you name it, everywhere, including myself. I'm a graduate of the United Kingdom as well as the Netherlands because of I am from a poor family, but it was Gaddafi who made it possible for me.
Okay.
So, and so on and so, thousands of schools, free education, free medical care, and the idea, that Gaddafi stole money, it's part of the campaign to make the man look like evil, to justify everything you do to him. Who would care about evil that?
Thank you. Hello.
Evening, Sisiogi.
Evening. Very quickly, Emmanuel. I don't have more than a minute.
Israel have intelligence, about October 7. And they have the capacity to minimize or stop it. Did Israel allow October 7 in order to overrun Gaza?
Okay, thank you. Right, did you hear that? Well, did Israel...
No, I'm sorry.
No worries at all. Did Israel permit October 7 to happen? Look away, let October 7 to happen in order to overrun Gaza or to commit the genocide that they're committing in Gaza right now?
Well, it's one of the theories, but I don't really, I don't really believe in it. Simply because why would the Israeli Prime Minister risk such a thing without actually being in control of what? Who could have predicted where the 7th of October attack will end in Tel Aviv? Nobody knows.
Indeed.
So it's absurd idea. It's one of the ideas. Circulated around, pushed around, propagated by people who don't believe in the resistance. And they say, well, they devastated Gaza and they achieved nothing. No, we achieved a lot.
Indeed. Let's talk about the Arab youth. What do you see the future in them? You often speak to them. And of course, a lot of them have seen failure from Iraq to Syria to Gaza. We've talked about the failure of the Arab League. What message do you give to them? Because indeed, the same is in Africa. What message? Where is the hope for them? I'm going to give you a minute to answer that, Doc.
There's always hope around, and the hope that the young people will shape the future. The young people in Africa, the young people in the Arab world will rise up one day. Everything you see today will change. Who would have thought that young Lumumba could have written very important chapter of the African history? Who would have thought that young Mandela, who went to jail for 27 years, most of his life actually being in jail, would actually write another big chapter in the future of Africa, not the history of Africa, but the future of Africa. So the future is for us, the future is ours, the young people, and we will shape the future in the way it should be and the way we like it. Maybe we have problems today, maybe we have regional conflicts, interstate conflicts, civil wars, poverty, hunger, you name it. Of course we have that, and we don't deny this. But year by year, we are improving. What is the rate of people who cannot afford schooling, for example, in Africa 50 years ago? And we are day to day. There's nobody in Libya, for example, who cannot afford school anymore. And there's nobody in Libya who's literate in terms of being able to read and write. And that was done by Gaddafi. So who would have thought, as I explained earlier, that a Traore, 26 years old, of Mali, of Niger, just kicked out of France. Who would have thought that France will ever leave that part of Africa? Okay, we have problems, we get down, we fall, we fail, but we try again, we stand up, we succeed.
Thank you.
This will happen before and will happen again.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mustafa Fetouri. Thank you. An African, a Libyan, and our dear brother. Do come back, please.
Sure. Thank you very much. I would love to join you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend, sir.
Same to you. Bye-bye.
.3 Nigeria Info. We are more than just radio. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Nigeria Info FM. Check us out on Facebook at Nigeria Info 99.3. Follow us on Twitter at Nigeria Info FM and on Instagram at Nigeria Info FM Lagos for live updates as it happens. 99.3 Nigeria Info.